Hello everyone, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Michael and today I'm going to share with you how to make fermented tomatoes. And I've got a lot of these little tomatoes here. If you've got some of these in your garden, if you don't have them in your garden, you definitely can get these at the farmer's market. And these are in abundance right now where I'm at. So definitely check this video out. If you like fermented foods and if you never have tried fermented tomatoes, then definitely stick with me and I'll show you how to do it today. I've got several videos on my channel where I use some different vegetables and ferment things. I make sauerkraut on my channel and pickles. So definitely check some of those videos out. I'll put some of the link in the description box below. So let's get started with this. So right now I've got 2 pounds of tomatoes. I've got a total of about 6 pounds that I've got. So I'm going to start out with this today. And I've got a 3-liter crock. And with my crock, I've got it as clean as I can get it. I've got clean hands. Everything in this needs to be really clean. So definitely give all of those a wash. And I've got some weights here that I've got that we'll be putting on the top of those. And of course, I've got the lid that goes on top of the crock. Now the crock that I've got here has a little reservoir on it that you can put water in it to keep the air from getting in it. That's the enemy with fermented foods, is the air. So we want to fill this up. We'll seal it off, and then as the process works for fermentation, it'll push out all of that air out of there, and you'll be left with nice fermented food. And I'm going to show you some steps today that's going to help you prevent mold from coming into your ferment. But on occasion you might find mold in there, and if you do, you want to discard the whole batch. We don't want to continue on with that process if there's mold in it, because it could be down into the actual food itself, and you definitely don't want that. So if you see mold in it, you'll throw that away and you can start over again. So we're going to start with our ingredients, and I've got my tomatoes that I've got here. I've given those a good wash, and then I've got some whole cloves of garlic that I've taken that hard outside skin off of those. So definitely take that off. You don't want to leave that in there with your ferment. And I've got some fresh basil that I've cut out of my garden, and we're going to be putting that into our ferment as well. So with that being said, let's start with our brine. Now with ferment, we'll be using salt for our preservative to get that ferment started on that. This is different from pickling, but you use vinegar for that. We're not going to be using vinegar in this. This will be salt and water will be what we'll be using to start our ferment on that. If you've got a ferment of some kraut that you've got, or some pickles, you can definitely put that into your mix. That'll jump start it a little bit faster, and you won't have to go through the longer stages of that as that's building itself up. But after about 3 or 4 days, you'll start seeing bubbles in it and things where it's starting to do its ferment. With the crock that I've got today, you won't be able to see that happening in there, but you'll be able to tell the gases will start coming out the top, and you might hear it as it's sitting out on your counter or wherever you've got it sitting. You might hear the lid on it as it's moving around where the gas is coming out of it. So you can definitely tell after a couple of days if that's happening. I'm going to go ahead and get my brine started. So I've got 2 liters of water, or that's 8 cups, and you want that to be a filtered water. You don't want to put a chlorinated water into your ferment, because that could really mess things up. I don't necessarily recommend you have to go out and buy distilled water. You can if you want to, but if you just want to take the water out of the tap and then let it set out overnight, just put a rag over the top of it just to keep it clean. That'll evaporate some of that chlorine out of there. You can also take this and put this on the stove and boil it. And then once it comes to a boil for 3 to 5 minutes, and turn it off, let it come back down to room temperature again, and that'll boil some of that chlorine out of there also. So you've got different ways to do that. If you've got filtered water, you can definitely use that. But definitely what we want to avoid is if you've got just pure chlorinated water out of the tap, you definitely want to get rid of some of that, because that could interfere with the fermentation process. So I've got 2 liters here, or 8 cups, and this is at room temperature now. And then for my salt, with my salt, I'm going to use the canning and pickling salt. This is just salt, or any type of salt that you want to use. You just want to make sure that the only ingredient on it is salt. You don't want any iodized salt. You don't want anything else in there that says anything other than salt. So this is why this is really nice, as canning and pickling, to do that. And you can use any type of salt that you want, as long as the ingredient on the label just says salt. So I've taken my 2 liters here, or my 8 cups, and I've multiplied that times 3%. So we want this to be a 3% solution. So I'm going to take 2,000 and times 0.03, and that's going to give me 60 grams of salt. Now if you don't have a kitchen scale, you definitely might want to invest in one of those when you're doing percentages and things. It just isn't more accurate measurement that way. So definitely check that out. You've got 2,000 milliliters here of water, 8 cups. So that's going to give us a 3% brine solution of 60 grams of salt, and I'm just going to put that in just like that. I'm going to give that a good mix through so that can dissolve. All right, so I've got that salt dissolved in that water now for our brine. I'm going to set that to the side. I'm going to bring my tomatoes up here, and so that way you can see what I'm going to get ready to do. And I'm going to bring my clean crock up here, and we're going to get started. So I've got a wooden skewer, and we want to check our tomatoes and make sure they're really firm. You want the firmest you've got. If you've got some soft ones, you might want to put those to the side, and you can use those for something else. You can eat them. And I've got a wooden skewer here. Now, if you don't have a wooden skewer, you can use a toothpick, and we're going to pierce the end of it here. I'm just going to take it and stick it into the end of it just like that, and that's going to allow that brine to get into that hole of that, and we'll just put that into our crock, and we'll go ahead and continue this on through until I get all of my tomatoes done. So I'm going to put a layer of tomatoes on the bottom, and then I'll come back and I'll show you what we're going to do with our basil and our garlic. All right, so I've got some of the tomatoes now. I've got a good layer down into the bottom of the crock. I'll pull this over, and with that we're going to add some of our garlic in. So I'll just take a couple of pieces of this garlic. We'll put it into the bottom here. And then we're going to take some of our basil. I'm just going to pull some of these leaves off this and just drop those down into there. And that way that'll give us a nice flavor on those tomatoes as that ferments. Now if you want to, you can leave the whole stem in there. If you want to do that, I'm going to show you a process I'm going to put on the top of it to keep any of that from floating around. But you can do it any way you like it. If you want to leave the stems on it, you definitely can. I'm going to go ahead and pull these off just like this. All right, now that we've got that one layer in there, we'll continue adding more layers in there. Like I said, I've got 6 pounds of tomatoes here, and I'll let you know how many I get into this crock. We definitely want to fill it up pretty full, and once we get that done, I'll tell you how many we got in there. But just continue now with your tomatoes, garlic, and your basil layers. All right, I've got my tomatoes, my basil, and my garlic now in my crock, and I've got the tomatoes up to about the bottom of this right here. And I did put 3 pounds in there. So I went and got another pound of my tomatoes, gave them a good wash, and continued the process until I got it filled up. I don't know if you can see down in there, but I've got a nice layer on those. So I put the basil down under the top of the tomatoes, but with the fermentation, you might get some movement on those, and that could push some of that basil to the top. So that's why we've got our weights. You definitely want to hold the food down under the brine solution, because the culprit to anything above that, if it's floating on the top, then the chances are you might get mold develop on the top of it. So definitely we don't want that again. Like I said earlier, if you get that, we'll throw everything out and we start over again. So I've got some cabbage leaves here, and I'm going to put those over the top to kind of hold everything down. If you've got grape leaves in your yard, you can definitely use those. Those have great tannins in the grape leaves. You can put those in. I'm going to put this over the top of the tomatoes, the basil, and the garlic, but I'm going to put just a little bit of my water in to go ahead and get that started filling up on that, and then I'm going to put this in. I'm not going to fill it completely to the top, but that'll kind of get a little bit of that into the bottom. And before I do that, I'm going to give that one more stir just to make sure that all of that is combined. I don't see any salt in it, but we definitely want to make sure that it's all combined up. So now let's add some of our brine solution in. All right, I've got that just at the top of where I can see the tomatoes are there. Now I'm going to put my cabbage on the top of that so that I make sure that that basil and garlic and those tomatoes stay under the brine solution. All right, I've got one of the leaves in. I'm going to go ahead and put another leaf in on this side over here where I can see some more of the tomatoes there as they're sticking up. And we're going to push all of that down on the sides so that we don't have any of that sides of that cabbage sticking up on it. All right, so now that I've got my cabbage leaves in, I did give that a good inspection, and I got everything on that covered. I don't see any of the tomatoes or anything like that sticking up. So now we're going to take our weights, and I'm going to put those in, and we're going to make sure that that gets held down really securely. All right, my weights are in now, and I'm going to give a visual inspection to make sure that I didn't have any of my basil or anything that's here on the top. You don't want to make sure that everything is clean on the top of this. We don't want any of our food sitting on the side of the jar up here under this lip where we can't see it. So give that a visual inspection just to make sure that everything is submerged. Now we're going to take this and we're going to fill the brine up the rest of the way into our crock, and I'm going to put this over the top of these weights so that it's not moving anything around in there, and make sure that it's covered really well. All All right, I've got that in there. I've got just a little bit left. It took almost all of it there. And I've got a good seal, and I've got a piece of basil there that I see floating. If I'd have left that in there, definitely that would have potentially caused some mold to start. So if you see anything that floats up on there, take that out. We definitely don't want that. I'm gonna put just a little bit more of the brine in it. All right, now we're ready for our seal. We're gonna give it one last look. We can't be too careful with this part of the process. So now we're gonna put our lid on it. And with that, I'm going to take the rest of the brine water that I've got here and put that here on the top. All right, I've got just a little bit of the brine on the top of there just to go ahead and create that seal on there. I'm going to be moving this away from here. And we're going to let this sit for at least 4 to 6 weeks. So we're going to put this someplace that's not going to be disturbed. If it's in your kitchen and your kitchen gets hot like mine when you're cooking, you might not want to put it there. You might want to put it in the pantry. And just be aware that you'll need to come in maybe daily and check the water level of this reservoir. You don't want this to dry out. You want to keep the water level in this, and that will keep the air out, and it will allow the gases inside to escape out of it. I'm going to set this to the side, and I'll fill up the top of the well here to the top, and I'll come back and show you what this looks like when I'm taking it out. I am back, and it has been 6 weeks, and I wanted to check on my tomatoes to see how they have done. I have not opened these, and we're going to open these today. And I've got some paper towels here, and just remember, when we talked about before, you wanted to make sure that you kept this well on the top here full of water. So to drain that, I've just got some paper towels, and I'm just going to put those here, and we're going to soak up that water that's on there. And you can use the same one over, just kind of squeeze it out, or you can get new ones. But it's just as easy just to squeeze it out, and it'll come right out of there. All right, I got enough of the water there that I can get my lid off of that. So let's open this up and reveal what we have. We've got some beautiful tomatoes. Let me give this a smell. Smells absolutely delicious, and I can see here on the top how those are really pretty. I don't see any mold on any of those, so that is a good sign of that. So now I've got a bowl here, and the easiest way to do this, I'm going to go ahead and take another paper towel here, and I want to get the rest of this water off the top and make sure that that gets really dry. And I'm just going to dump them into this bowl because I don't want to crush these, and I'm going to get a funnel and a big spoon, and we're going to put them into this jar. All right, so now we got enough of that water off of there. All of that's off. And I'm going to get me a bowl here, and I'm just going to dump these into this bowl. These smell absolutely incredible and look so good, and I can't wait to taste one of these. I know they're going to be absolutely delicious. I'm going to grab one of these tongs and give one of these a try. That is incredible. It's got that fermented taste like you would have when you were doing like a cabbage or anything like that. If you've had crab, it has that same taste of that. That basil that's in there has really brought out those extra flavors in there. I could not have asked for a better crock of fermented tomatoes here. Now let's move on to the next step. So I've got a jar here with the lid and a funnel, and I've got a nice spoon over here that I'm going to use to put these in. I do not want to can these because if you can them, because it has to come up to such a high temperature, it will kill any of the probiotics that's in there. So I'm going to put these in the refrigerator. These will be fine in there. They will continue to develop a nice flavor in the refrigerator over time. But these are going to be so delicious. You want to put these on salads. You can put these with beans, anything you want to, soups and stews. They would be incredible as an addition to the topping on those as a garnish. So let's go ahead and move these now into this jar. Look at those. You can see that basil that was in there. That looks really good. Let's put these right in. We see our garlic here that we put in there earlier. That looks really good too. I've got my fermented tomatoes now in my jar here, and those look absolutely delicious. And I'm just going to put these with the lid on it just like that and close that up. This will go into the refrigerator. At this point, you need to put it in the refrigerator. If you leave it out on the counter with it open like this, it could start to mold. So we definitely don't want that. So we'll put that in the refrigerator. That's going to slow the fermenting process down. It won't stop it, but it'll slow it down. And you'll be able to eat these, like I said, just on anything. I'm going to make me a big pot of beans and some rice and some pork chops. And I'm going to have some of these on the side. I know that's going to be delicious. If you like this content, maybe you might consider giving me a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And while you're at it, check out one of these other two videos over here on the side. You might find something that you like. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave me a comment if you have ever fermented tomatoes before, or if this is your first time fermenting them, leave me a comment how yours turned out. I'd love to hear from you. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye now.